Welcome to Mindset Chatter, episode 2 with the amazing Ryen Lago. Ryen, hello. Thank you for joining.
Hi.
Um,
Thank you. I'm super excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
oh yeah, this is going to be super cool. So we talked about before I hit record here that you really came to my attention as being an awesome potential for a guest and a conversation based on a response to a group chat you responded to. And um, If anyone watching does not know Ryen, she is an incoming freshman for the Roberts Wesleyan field hockey team and a Morgan's Message ambassador. And I'm excited to get into today's topic, which is distractions masquerading as opportunities. And they actually turn out not to be. So I'm interested to poke into your brain a
Yeah.
little bit and see what you're thinking about this topic. But kind of
hmm
before we get going, Ryen, what's on
Yeah.
what's on your mind right now? You ready to go? What you kind of thinking before we dive in?
Uh, I'm ready. This is honestly, this will be the first time that I've really like sat down with somebody outside of the Camden community, talking about mental health and all that. So obviously I still have a lot more to learn. So I'm super excited that I get to do this with you. And obviously you're big on, the whole mental health scene and mindset performance and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a little nervous. I will be honest, I'm a little nervous, but we have a lot of good things to talk about, so I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, no reason to be nervous. This is just going to be a nice casual conversation, and all two of my followers might see it, so it's not a big deal here. So when I first thought of this, like I think of when we're like working our process, if we talk about like process goals versus outcome goals, kind of things like that. When I first saw this distractions posing as opportunities, I thought of two different ways to kind of view it. And one was kind of distractions within our process that kind of derail us or get us sidetracked. Um, Can you, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Can you think of a time when you were working your process to achieve something and something looked like, oh yeah, this is it, and you've kind of taken it, grabbed it, went down that hole, and it turned out to be, I don't want to say a waste of time, but certainly took you in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I think when I think about this the most, I kind of think about just, like I have like a people pleaser side to me, so I give energy where, it's not really giving back to myself. Um, so when I think about things like that, just like helping everybody else first instead of myself. So like trying to be there for somebody, and they're not necessarily there for me. So I kind of derail my own mental health for the sake of somebody else. I think that's probably my biggest uh, experience with something like that. Um, but even just like over planning my life, like like I said, like you said, I do Morgan's Message. I was a senior in high school this year, so I kind of fill my plate until it gets to be all too much, and then I have to like really take a step back and sit down. And I think it's funny that I mentioned that because just last week of high school, I'm running around like crazy, and my mom was like, "You just need to slow down. You just need to, like sleep." It's like she's like, "Just come home, sleep, take some time yourself." So I did that, and I will say this week I felt a lot better. But I think like that's my two. Those are my two most. Those are like my experiences within this kind of subject. So I think it's interesting that that's what you wanted to talk about for sure.
I think you said three things. It was probably under the two thing umbrella that really popped out at me. The first one was people pleaser. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how often do we have a great idea or a great path for ourselves, and we kind of figure out how we're going to attack that, and we start it, and I see people pleasing from two things. You either get the people that are, oh, you can't do that. That'll never happen.
Mm,
And it's
mm,
kind of, I think sometimes it's out of maybe jealousy of like, oh man, why didn't I think of that? But the other
right,
kind of thing I think of sometimes is that we're always kind of looking out of the corner of our eye to get that nod of approval. And I think that nod of approval is maybe a huge distraction as well, because, a lot of times people aren't really going to be on board with what we're trying to do. They're like, well, that's weird and that's not normal. And I mean, is that kind of
right.
your people pleasing experience?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think that I've always been kind of self-conscious of everybody else around me. Um, and I grew up in a world where so I played softball for a really long time of my life before I went the path of field hockey. So playing softball, I was in such a competitive environment. I was playing with people older than me, and I was always looking like, okay, they're so much better than me. How can I get, to this level? So I think I kind of inherited that as I've grown up, like definitely looking for this nod of approval, like um just like what are other people thinking? But the reality is like you live in a judgment filled world, and and that's a distraction in itself. Like I don't need in reality like the pros that you see chose they weren't born great, but they went to a plan, stuck with it, and now they're great. So and they didn't need that approval from anybody else.
I think I didn't even think of this before you said it, but I actually think that's a huge distraction for us is the comparison of our journey to someone else's especially without knowing the amount of work they've put in or where they've come from. You've probably seen that iceberg
Mm-hmm.
diagram where all we see is the tip of it and we don't see everything under it. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that's huge because, um,
Right.
and how that impacts us. I think it's funny because I just saw a quote this morning and I don't exactly remember it to its detail, but it was about being in your zone and being focused on your kind of like your own thing. And one of the key components this quote said is like
Mm-hmm.
you have to not care. So it's kind of like you grab
Right.
onto your
Yeah.
vision and you just like I don't care what people have to say. I don't care what happens. It's just I'm going to keep at it. Kind of your point to the
Mm-hmm.
pros.
Right. Yeah, and it's like I've always struggled with that myself. Like I grew up in a family where I was like I owe everything to my mother. I will say that I will through and through. I will say that she raised all. I have two siblings. She raised all three of us to be like great people. We care about everything and everyone. Um, but it almost gets to be too much sometimes. Like I care too much. Like I think about like the past two field hockey seasons of mine. Granted, we were great teams, but we had our drama, on the team, and I was almost so much consumed with that I forgot about like myself. Like, okay, what I can do to be better, and I was trying to like manage how the team can get better, how the drama can like lower itself and all of that. And so like that's but like you can care, but you can't care too much. Like, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've definitely noticed that in my life, and I've seen it too, where um, and I've heard the analogy of like if you want to hold on to a handful of sand, your first reaction is you have to like kind of squeeze it to hold on to it because it's so loose and kind of, I don't know, flowy, if you want to call it
Okay.
that. But the
Mhm.
tighter you squeeze, the more that comes out of your hands. You
Right.
have to kind of have a loose, and I've noticed that in probably especially relationships I've had, and maybe some of the things you own, that if you care too much about it, there's almost this unhealthy possession about it. And it's hard to,
Oh
it's
yeah.
hard to back off and be like, oh, just kind of let it be and appreciate the fact that you have it when you do. And you know what? Maybe you won't, things get lost. We lose people in our lives. And if you care too much, maybe it hurts too much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've seen that myself, with friendships. Obviously, when you grow up and you have these friends, you think, oh my God, these friends are like my most prized possession per se, and you kind of want to be like, as unhealthy as it is, you want to be like, oh, only hang out with me and not other people. But that's caring too much. Like you have to have your boundaries, and the same thing goes with like um with these distractions or whatever. Like when you create goals for yourself, a lot of it is creating a plan, and um I mean, each goal has its own rhythm, your own momentum that you have to do to fulfill that goal. Um, but the reality is that it's all dependent on your focus. So if you're focused too much on the wrong things, then there goes your goal per se. Um, but the second you overload your mindset, the second you do that, you disrupt all of that rhythm that you just created. Even if you have good intentions, so like you say, opportunities are disguised. So like for myself, like I said, if I overload my plate, if I get into too many, clubs, take on too much extracurricular curriculars, blah blah blah, that derails myself from a goal that I just set for myself.
Well, I think that ties in really tightly. You said about like relationships and friends that like, oh, only hang out with me. And the first thing I thought of when
Mm-hmm.
you said that is, ooh, unhealthy relationship. And
Yeah,
but then kind of into the process thing, if you're so like if you're so tightly wound around this is how the process has to go, I think you also set yourself up for failure in all of a sudden something doesn't go as planned, right? Of course, it's not going to obstacles happen. But if you're not willing to let go a little bit and kind of adopt, there's the dog. I think that's a
yeah.
huge
Hey,
distraction as well because all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I failed. This didn't work. And you're not willing to be like, it's okay. I'll just adapt.
yeah, right. Absolutely. But I think like in meaningful progress, you think that the first thing that could go wrong is either you fail or just like the obvious time wasters. I think like something as stupid as your friend sends you a text message and you're trying to do homework and you pick it up and oh god, now you go down a rabbit hole of doom scrolling through my phone. Like those are the two things people think about when like you're getting distracted, but that's not the case at all. Like there's so many more things, and like I like to think about it like if you overload yourself, then or it's the same thing with like when you lift or you practice or any of that. You have to take your rest days because that's essential to maintaining your body health. But taking those days, like if you overload yourself, you have to take rest days for your mental health too, your mindset to be able to stay on focus to that goal that you're creating your momentum and your rhythm for. But that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I like that too. And that goes right to your filling the plate thing. And it sounds like you may have a tendency to be a lot like I am in that you can get trapped into thinking you're being productive because you have so much to do. And yet,
Right.
like you said about the scrolling and stuff, 80% of what you said yes to might be counterproductive and taking you off of the path you want to be on, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
who knows what it is. But yeah, so I think your point about, it's okay to take on maybe a few things, but it
Yeah.
needs to be, you need to be mindful and aware of what you're taking on because
Mm-hmm.
before you know it, you're so diluted. You're like, well, what the heck happened to my goal progress?
Right. But I think that's the big thing too, is that like you it's it's good to have other things to focus yourself on. Like for example, like my goal right now for myself, obviously I had hip surgery 2 months ago. So my goal for myself is getting myself back into this rhythm and staying consistent with my recovery so that I can recover and play field hockey and be productive in that sense. Um, play field hockey without pain again. That's my ultimate goal here. But be able
It's a
to play
good
in general.
goal.
And I think yeah, like be able to play in general. Like I think people are taking that for granted in itself too. Um, but like my that's my goal, and it's good to have other things to focus on. You can load your plate up. Let me go work. Let me go work a job. Let me do all this other stuff. That's fine, but you have to be mindful about how much you're filling yourself with, because you know it just disrupts your overall mental health, your body, all of that if you're overloading yourself. Um, but yeah, and I like to think about it a lot. It's like when I have opportunities come my way, it's not if it's just a good opportunity. It's if is this a good opportunity right now for what I want right now. Um, so you have to move with like intentionality of like what am I trying to get towards and how is this helping me.
Yeah, and I think on your kind of on like your recovery back to playing field hockey and having other things to do, I think it can be easy to get distracted by almost that busy work. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's say working is less painful physically than actually kind of rehabbing and trying to get back to field hockey. All of a sudden that effort pendulum may swing over to working because, oh, you know what? I'm
It's
not
easier.
hurting as much when I'm doing this. And I think that could be an easy distraction too, because you have
Mm-hmm.
to kind of embrace the hard or embrace that challenge.
Right. And I think another thing for me personally is like I've played sports my entire life. So now I have to limit myself. I have to be like, okay, I can't play sports now because in a sense that was my whole identity. Like I'm going to college to play field hockey, all of this stuff. In a sense, that was my whole identity, and now I have to take a couple of steps back. And it was like, okay, now what do I do? Because now I am physically restricted to I can't run, I can't jump, I can't, any of that. And I had to give myself other things to focus on, but I also had to remember that I'm still trying to get better. I still have, and I keep saying this to everybody. It's like I have I've always been the person to push myself. I've always been like in lifts and workouts and practices, all that kind of stuff. I've always tried to push the limits with what I can do. So like PRing, for example, I love the PR. It's a great day when I do that. But I also have to remember that like the goal that I have for myself right now is I have 4 years of field hockey to play for for after my recovery. So this recovery has to be nice, and I have to set a goal and stick to it. So although I'm distracting myself with like I have a job, I play with the dogs. Actually, I had school for and up until yesterday. So I was distracting myself with those things, but I had to keep in mind, okay, how is this helping me to recover so I can go to college and I can play field hockey and I can be healthy in the long run.
So you made me think of something else, and this is probably going to hurt my brain a little bit in thinking of it. So you're fully recovered, you're back to 100%.
Mm-hmm.
You're rocking it on the field hockey field. How like what is the end goal of collegiate athletics, right? I think because what
Mm.
you made me think of is in 4 years, 4.5 years, whatever it is, when you graduate out of college, how could your own identity as a collegiate field hockey player actually be a distraction for the true purpose of everything?
Ooh, wow. That's good. I mean, when everybody says it's like, okay, I've played field hockey or I've played sports for the last 16 years of my life. What happens when it's gone? Yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about that in that sense. Like, I know for me, my main focus going to college was, okay, I want to continue to do something that I love, which was the game of field hockey. Um, but in a sense of like my identity, like I don't. Oh, that's a good question.
I told you my brain was going to hurt.
But 4 years, over 4 years, it's not just playing field hockey. At the end of the day, for me, it's creating new relationships, obviously, with new teammates, new coaches, new teams that we play against. Um, but I think a lot of me playing sports was the aspect of like what life lessons it's teaching me. So for in my high school years, I think a lot about how this is creating teamwork and leadership and stuff like that. Like how can I be a good example? How can I set myself up to influence younger players, my teammates? Um, I think that's been the biggest life lesson for me. But it's also not. I will say this: it's not to give energy to things that don't give it back.
Well, that's a good one.
Um, um, I think that's really where I want to focus myself on for the next 4 years. And I know, I mean, a lot of people have the same issue. You try to control things that like you physically can't control. Um, but in the field hockey world, I mean, I'm just ready for more new life lessons that I can help apply to my everyday life, and I think that's a big reason why I played sports and I am sticking with it through college. And but at the end of the day, it's just because I love the game and I love the people that it's brought to me. Um, all of that. But I also think it's a learning experience in itself. Um, obviously, I have the next 4 years to experience my life in a different way than high school has been for me. And so that's been something I've been very much looking forward to.
I think you have an interesting opportunity too, with your interest in sports psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and we're kind of aligned in that manner. I got into, and I'm very careful of how to classify what I do, and I definitely call it performance mindset. So I'm certainly not
Right.
a licensed therapist. I'm certainly not a degreed sports psychologist. But I was actually talking about this yesterday with someone, is kind of my interest and my experience in this realm is actually feet on the ground daily
Mm-hmm.
interactions with, it started with goalies and expanded outwards. But I think also for 4 years for you, you have a great opportunity to almost do field work on a daily
Right.
basis of
Yeah.
seeing how what you're interested in actually plays out on not only what you experience, but what like your
Well,
teammates are
other.
experiences and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool that you say that, and ultimately, like for me, I know that one of the biggest things was I was doing Morgan's message, but like I don't know it all. I don't have all the answers to everybody's problems. Um, but the more you hear about other people's experience, the more other people talk about it, the more you can learn from that. So that was one of the biggest things I learned in the past, you know, however long it's been, 8 months of doing Morgan's message. It's like the more you talk, the more you hear, the more you can learn. So that's definitely something I can apply that to what I want to do in my future. Um, but yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
I
really cool.
think you just hit on one of my favorite things to think about,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. And I think a huge distraction that maybe we view as an opportunity or that we finally made it, is that we think we're there. We
Oh yeah.
think we know it all. We're like, oh, I'm good. I've reached the pinnacle. And yet, if you look around on that pinnacle, you'll notice there's like you're in a mountain range and all these other mountains are higher still. But
Mm-hmm.
when you have this stubborn refusal to like continue learning, I think that's a huge distraction to us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And another thing I think about is like in like the job world. Um, so obviously you go to college, you get a degree for what you want to do, for what you're interested in, and that's how it should be. And then, for example, you take a higher paying job, but it's not necessarily it's not aligning with your long term goals. So I think about that a lot. It's like I have this path set for me. I'm going to college. I have to um and I think that sports plays a lot in with that. Like you said, experiencing it firsthand for myself and for my teammates. That's another reason why I chose to play field hockey in college. Is and I've always said this. I don't want to be the psychologist that sits down and talks about everybody's feelings. Obviously, I will if I have to, but I want to be on a field. I want to see the players playing and give them good mindset perform like kind of like how you're there with our team as we play, as we practice, all of that. Like that's what I want to be. I don't want to like I want to experience that firsthand because I know that those experiences can help me and influence other decisions. But I mean, like I said, you have a path set for you. You go to high school, you go to college, you get a degree, and you go have a job that's based on your degree. That's all set up for a reason. And the second you get distracted by everything else, that's how you lose those long term goals that you just set up for yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. I'd much rather be a practitioner than a theorist, whatever that word is. I guess I say it a lot. It's like be a warrior, not a librarian. It's great to store all
Mm-hmm.
this knowledge, but actually go out and use it.
And use it, yeah.
You hit exactly on my next distraction thing because we talked about in system, but now we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to talk about like out of system. Like all of a sudden this higher paying job comes up, or all of a sudden we get squirreled and we're like, ooh, well, that looks like something that might be more fun to do. And all of a
Right.
sudden, boom, off you go. And it's like,
You're right.
so I think have like what experience have you ever experienced something like let's call it an outcome thing where all of a sudden, or here's a great one. We see shortcuts all the time. Like, oh,
Mm.
if you want to do this, this is the way to do it. And I've been working my system so hard, and all of a sudden I'm like, shortcut? Okay. And have you taken any shortcuts that look like, you know, it might work
Oh,
and they didn't?
now I gotta sit down and think. I'm sure I have. Um, I mean, nothing really comes to the top of my head, but I'm sure I have. Um, in that sense. Um, but nothing's that. I mean, one of the most shortcuts that I think about, um, is like for me. Obviously, I knew I wanted to do sports psychology in college, so I started Morgan's Message as it's kind of like a firsthand. I want to learn now before I have to wait until college. Um, and that was the shortcut that ended up being pretty successful in the long run. But nothing that I think ends up being like a distraction or derails me. I don't, nothing comes to mind, but I'm sure I have. I'm sure I have.
I'm not sure I would call your Morgan's Message deep dive a distraction.
Yeah,
That
no.
almost goes back to the field work thing. It's like you grabbed onto this thing that looked like it would be very helpful for you, dove in, said, "Yeah, I think it is." But either you saw that through the completion, which turned out, and maybe this is a good lesson too, right? Through that deep dive and seeing it through, it actually turned out to be something that's beneficial in the long run, not only for you, but for your school, your community, and anyone else who was
Hmm.
touched by this.
Right. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't call it a distraction at all. That ended up being pretty influential and that kind of stuff in my life. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to controlling the voice inside your head. Like obviously we all have this voice inside of our head that tells us, let's do this, let's go do this. Um, but it all comes back to controlling that voice, telling yourself, you know, getting yourself back on this line of okay, this is my goal, this is what I'm headed towards. And control that voice inside your head. That's been a big thing for me is um that. But I also think that like people say all the time opportunities are endless. And obviously they're all out there. But in that instance, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing because then you can get so distracted by all these opportunities that come your way instead of just sticking your plan, sticking your path.
Which doesn't mean it's not okay to change direction every once in a while if it's, but it's got to be done with some thought and some mindfulness and not just haphazardly. It's funny you talk about the voice in your head. I call her Tracy, and like Tracy, and there's a story behind why she's called Tracy, but she's constantly yapping at us. And I think it was interesting you framed it as her yapping at us and oh, do this, oh, do that, oh, do that.
Hmm.
Because when I have discussions with athletes about Tracy, it's usually about things like, oh, you can't do this or don't do that. It's almost
Yeah.
I always address her from the standpoint of she's trying to hold us back and kind of put limiting beliefs on us or tell us we suck or whatever.
Yeah,
It was
definitely.
really it's interesting that you have her trying to like, oh, maybe do this because it'll be easier, or maybe do that because it'll be more fun, or maybe that's I
Yeah,
love that perspective on it.
right. But I don't think I think everybody has it differently. Like obviously I've had that voice that's like, okay, don't do this, you can't do it. But then I've also had it where go do that, it'll be better. This will be better than where you're at. So I think it can definitely go both ways for sure. But it's a matter of how much you allow it to, control your everyday decisions. Um, but yeah, I mean that's just like I always try to limit my voice inside the head because I know that what path I'm on will definitely take me to where I'm meant to be. And a lot in that retrospect is I actually told my mom the other day, I was like, I'm writing God's plan and that's about it right now. Like, um, so that's been big for me is just everything happens as it should happen. And if I'm on this path to, like, for example, obviously hip surgery was not it was a big bump in the road for me, obviously. But I know that in the long run, I will end up being a better athlete than I was before. I'll be able to play in less pain, um, and all that. So, like in that instance, I was like, okay, God really did do me a favor. Um, but yeah.
I think the interesting thing about Tracy, about that voice in your head, um,
Mhm.
regardless of how she's yapping at you, because obviously she impacts the present moment, those immediate distractions. She obviously likes to reflect upon the past, but I think maybe the biggest distraction she causes to us is in terms of the future because I think she gets in our head and we start thinking I have to do this or I must do this now. And I think back to the kind of holding on to something too tightly in our rigid process. I think I think when we start thinking in our heads that I have to do something, we limit our opportunities a lot.
Mhm.
So then the other thing you said that was really interesting, it's kind of filling our place too, our focus. And we
Yeah.
talked
Um,
Yep. I think our connection went funny.
a little bit.
All right, so
We good now? Can you hear me?
yeah, I think we're back. So I mean, were you trying to say something in terms of like
I think
our
we're back.
our future voice?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that like definitely holding on to opportunities way too tightly can derail you from uh that process. Like you just have to kind of let them come um and where and use them where they're meant to be used, rather than trying to micromanage some opportunity that you're given and using that too tightly. You just have to let it be what it is necessarily. I mean, essentially.
Well, I like the term micromanaged because that's one of I do not like being micromanaged and I do not like to micromanage. So I think that gets into kind of trust though, right? You either have to trust your employees, you have to trust your teammates, you have to trust your process, you have to trust your
Oh
plan,
yeah.
you have to trust the unknowns,
Hmm.
which I
Yeah,
think
absolutely. I
that's
mean,
hard to do.
oh yeah, it definitely is. But I mean, it's like in the world of like field hockey per se. I mean, you have a defense, you have an offense, you have a goalie. You have to trust all of those people to do their job on the field. Um, and that's how you win games. I mean, or that's how you have a good team bond in general. You have to trust other people, and like I said, I think that comes a lot from talking about your experiences and using those to influence everybody else around you. Um, But ultimately, that's what creates trust on the team is talking and just using your voice ultimately.
Well, and I think we touched on it earlier too. I think a component of building that trust and stuff is also the not thinking you know it all and kind of being humble enough to be like, you know what? I run into a lot with goalie coaching. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm the goalie coach, but I'm not the keeper of all goalie knowledge. I don't,
Mhm.
you guys are the ones playing the position, so help me out here a little bit.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But I think like your progress isn't dependent on how much you're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters. So you have to prioritize your focus over, this flattery, you want to be the best of the best. Um, you have to take the criticism that you're being given from your coaches, your teammates, and listen. Ultimately, that's where your trust comes from is listening to others and listening to what they have to say and applying that not just to your game but to your everyday life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like the thing you said about um, almost doing the self-serving things to make yourself feel better. It
Mm-hmm.
makes me think about are you taking on challenges that are making you better yourself, or are you taking on challenges that make you kind of go, oh yeah, I've got that.
Yeah, I mean, a challenge in the long run should be something that pushes you. Um, and I know, like for me, I knew, like going into my college decision, I knew that Roberts would push me. I knew that you know not just on the field, but academically as well. Um, I mean, things may feel like progress, but ultimately they just serve your ego more than your purpose. Um, and I think that's big. That's a big misconception that you see nowadays when it comes to like distractions.
Well, I think it's easy kind of that it's easy to get tied up in your own statistics. Then,
Oh
that's I
yeah.
think that's a huge distraction like you talked about is, you know, do I do the right thing when I need to make that choice, or am I doing it strictly for myself so I feel good? I think that's a tough one. That would be a whole different podcast.
Oh yeah. But I think I said in the text, I was like, you have to build your trust by celebrating everybody's wins off the field or on the field. I mean, and I think that's a big thing. What stuck me to Robert so well is that I mean everybody there is just welcoming and friendly and they want to see you succeed in the long run. And I think that was something that I hadn't really ever, not that I've never experienced it before, but it was the whole entire environment. It wasn't just a few choice people, it was everybody. And even on the team, as I've seen, I haven't even had a practice with the team yet. And everybody, you send a picture and everybody's loving the message or loving your picture, saying congrats, or, all this stuff. So I think you have to find it. A lot of it comes down to finding an environment where people want to see you succeed, but it's also like you develop that on the inside of yourself by surrounding yourself with people who want that for you.
Well, let's talk about the dark side of that because like with everything there's a light and a dark side, right? There's
Yeah.
always two sides of the coin. And I one of the things I've seen and we've talked about on the team is that it is really awesome that you want to, pass the ball and make your teammates successful, but there comes a point in time where your teammate wants you to take the shot. They want you to have the
Right.
ball. You have to want the ball in that key situation so you can score that goal ultimately, because that may be what your position demands and what your teammates actually want from you. I mean, what are your thoughts on the balancing the making everyone successful and oh, I don't want to be
Mhm.
selfish and actually really wanting to be the person that finishes the game off?
Right. I think that's interesting that you say that because as much as you celebrate the wins of everybody else, you have to celebrate them yourself. Like you have to the praise that you're given, you have to take it and not use it to um like influence your ego necessarily, but you have to use it to believe in yourself and use it to, you know, continue forward with more passion and more um focus and like everything you have to do is with intention ultimately. So that praise that you're given, you have to use it to your advantage. And obviously it's great to have somebody that's um sorry, the dog's licking everywhere right now.
Dogs will be dogs.
Oh yeah. Ready? Say hi.
Hi, dog.
Oh, hi dog. She's been there the entire time. Um, but no, like I said, I think we talked about it in the beginning is like you have to want that for yourself ultimately, and it can't just be something that somebody's trying to push you towards doing. You have to stay right here. You have to stay right here. She has a obsession with going under the blanket. She loves it. I don't
I
know
have a
why.
cat like that.
Okay, fine, go. Go and stop distracting me.
No, that's a
But
good
yeah, that's just
distraction.
oh yeah, that's one that you know. But yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a light and a dark side to everything, but um, you have to find the light.
How do you manage the voice in your head, like under pressure, tie game, you're in OT, balls on your stick, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you know you could take it and finish it, but how do you manage that voice in your head going, "Oh, I'm being selfish. Oh, I'm going to get side eye for this. Oh, I'm going to get, whatever the case is." How do you come to terms with that, this is the time for me to put the team on my back and I'm going to take care of business.
Right. Um, Obviously, I mean, for me, I've had that voice in my head a million times. Like, oh, you can't do this. Give the ball up. Um, it, you can't. You know, just like that negative. Um, and I think a lot of it comes back for me is like trusting in my abilities. It's like, okay, I've practiced for this. I have the stick skills. I have, and I always think it's like, oh my God, all the eyes are on me when I have the ball. But that's not what you should be thinking about. It should be thinking about like, okay, I have this team to support me, and if I do this, if I carry the ball up the field, if I, score the winning shot, whatever, then people will be supportive of me. Even if you absolutely biff the shot and it goes wide, whatever. Um, Even if I felt confident in my support system, but I also have to feel confident in myself. Like I knew that I had the skills, and sometimes it's not about letting the pressure get to you. Sometimes it's just that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you thought you had it, and you didn't. But you have to take those with a grain of salt. You learn from everything. Um, no, but in that, excuse me, wow. Um, but and that just comes with experience. Like I've played, I don't know, 6 good years of field hockey. I have to be confident in my skills, and I also have to know that I can still learn from them. So those moments like that, I can learn from. But a lot of it's just building myself up, even if people can't. Um,
Well, and I think it also goes back to we talked about earlier on about not caring. And I think there was a Michael Jordan quote. Actually, I think it was a television ad for Nike, maybe, that he was saying, I've taken so many shots, I've missed so many game-winning
mm-hmm,
shots and stuff
mm-hmm,
like that. But it didn't stop him from still wanting the ball and trying it because I think he probably knows, again, it's another quote that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
right,
And I
yeah.
think it's having that confidence that, yeah, it might go in, it might not go in, but if I don't take it, it's definitely not going in.
It's not going to happen, right? Like you don't know that until you take that leap forward and you do it. I mean, um, I also think about it's funny that you say Michael Jordan. I forget what it might have been him actually, but some professional NBA star didn't make his high school varsity basketball team.
That was him, I
And
think.
I think it was, yes. And now he's in the NBA, and look how successful he's been. But you have to celebrate those small wins over the things that you didn't do. I mean, for me, it's like I wouldn't be playing field hockey if I didn't reach out to Coach Marissa and want her to come watch me. Um, but you have to take those small chances with intention and with a good mindset, honestly. Um, but yeah.
Well, and how many of those well-intentioned, how many of those shots you have a choice to take or not take are in your daily life with everything?
Oh,
In
all the time.
relationships or academically or work-wise or athletic-wise. It's like there's probably at least a couple times an hour that you could probably do something that you're holding yourself back from.
Right. But again, that goes back to controlling the voice inside of your head. You have to convince yourself that it's worthy of taking the shot for. Um,
And honestly, I think sometimes for me, I take chances knowing that there is a very high probability that it's just going to be a disaster. But it's like,
mhm.
what will I get out of that disaster? There's
Right.
you got to embrace that growth opportunity we talked about it last podcast with MC, kind of embracing the messiness and understanding that, man, it's just going to be ugly, but it's going to be awesome.
Right. And I mean, I think a lot of it for me, it's like I played softball growing up, and your average, it's what, 3 out of 10 at bats that you get a hit. I mean, that's a low probability, but it's still there. It's still a chance. And even if I strike out one at bat, okay, I have another at bat to bounce back off of that. Same thing with field hockey. The thing I love about field hockey is that if you mess up, if somebody takes the ball off your stick, okay, the ball's going to get back to you again during the game. And then you have another opportunity to show your skill, to use your stick handling, use your knowledge to get the ball up the field. But you can't dwell on one mistake. You have to learn from it, move on, flush it. We always say flush it
Yep.
and move on. Use it to be better. Um, and that's another thing in itself. That's a distraction itself that you don't necessarily understand is that like you can have a bad game and you can go and sit home and dwell on it, or you can get better from it.
Well, that goes back to what's your identity wrapped up in, or I mean, right? Or is it so wrapped up in you being
Mm-hmm.
successful in whatever it is that when you're not, which inevitably you're not, does it
Mm-hmm.
does it smack you back down? And kind of to your softball analogy, right? Okay, I'm hitting every 3 out of 10. I'm batting 300. Man, I am missing seven. I'm not being successful seven times. How much better does those three times feel when you get up there and you actually smack one and get the third or
Right.
whatever, right? Now
Right.
you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Like yeah. No, but you have to like embrace those small wins. Absolutely. It's like, I know that one game does not define me as a player. One game doesn't, make up the whole rest of my career. I've had a million better games than I have, well, I've probably had a million bad games more than I've had good ones, and that's just the reality of not only sports but life in general. But it's all about, like I said, I love learning life lessons from things like sports. It's all about learning the lesson and becoming better from it.
Well, and I think I'd like to expand on your one bad game doesn't make me a bad player.
Hmm.
It does not make you a bad person. And kind of back to the identity, it's like, am I Knowlesy the field hockey player, or am I nosy who plays field hockey and I play music and I do this and I have all these other kind of aspects of
Right,
me so that the one point of contention or doesn't like totally wreck me. I'm just be like, oh, I'm going to go create some music for a while or whatever.
right. Like you have those things to bounce back off, and like I said, you should explore these other opportunities that you give, and you should always have something else, so your identity isn't wrapped up of, okay, I just play field hockey and that's it. Um, but it's like you have those things to bounce you back, and ultimately, like going back to like the team. your team is there to support you as well. And the more you talk about those feelings with your team, the more trust is given and earned, you know? Um,
And the more interesting you are to them because you're not just, you care about more than just what they are on the field.
right. And that's where true friendships come from. 100%. I mean, some of the closest friends I have is people I've played sports with, and people I can be vulnerable with no matter what. Um, but yeah, that just creates a whole like trust filled environment. So you trust your teammates on the field, but also off the field when it truly, when other things arise.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I want to end on one last one because we've kind of bounced off it a couple times, and you're again, I feel like you're very much like me in this regard. Is we've talked about focus and staying focused
Mm-hmm.
on what you're trying to do and picking the right opportunities. Um, so I think when we think about focus, a lot of times, we think about maybe a camera and we're focused in on what we want to do,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, focusing is at least equally important to what's out of focus and what we're not
Oh yeah.
focusing on. And it's like saying no. How how hard is it for you to say no? For me, it's almost
Oh yeah.
impossible. And I get
Yeah.
so like overwhelmed because I've said yes to everything because I'm crazy.
Right.
So I mean, give me like run through some thoughts on like saying no at the right time or to the right thing and how do you identify in the moment when you're like really stoked that something came onto your plate and you're like, oh no, I gotta say no because it's a huge
No, I guess.
distraction.
Right. Um, I think, I mean, just like you said, I've had such a time saying no to people, like I always want to be the best helper that I can be. Like I want to be there for a friend, whatever. Um, but if I have something else going on, it's hard I feel bad. Like if I have to say no, I will apologize 1,000 times. Um, but it's like you have to reclaim that energy into yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, all you really have is yourself. Um, and you have to feed yourself with that energy. Um, but I mean, also just reclaiming your focus and your momentum towards your goals. You're allowed to say no to things that don't fulfill you, don't fulfill, what you're looking for in your life. And I think that's such a big problem nowadays. I've heard that a million times from people over and over and over again. Um, but it also comes down to like, if I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. I think that's a big thing too, is that like people will judge you for saying no just because you don't want to do it. Like if I don't want to go get ice cream with some friends, I don't want to, you know, people will take that as like a threat if you say no.
Right. Or an offense
Like,
to against them.
right. But it's like I just want to take some time for myself. Like I'd rather be alone right now in that moment than go hang out with friends. But and there's a time of day where I will go hang out with those friends and go get ice cream and all that. But you also can't overload yourself. I mean, like I've said, like for me, I was going to school and then going to practice and then work and then but like where do I find that time for myself? So like if I was asked to pick up an extra shift at work, I would always say yes. But then I had to take a step back and be like, okay, I have to say no because I have some schoolwork that needs to be done and I need some time for myself ultimately. Um but yeah, it's important to focus on, obviously what you want to do, and what your goals and your momentum is flowing towards. But also, I mean, I think you said what's focusing on what's out of the picture is also just as important because if I'm doing this one thing, if I focus on this, how would that affect me too? How would that influence my decisions and that?
Well, I think the extra picking up the extra shift at work is a good example because we want to be seen as good employees. We want to be seen with good work ethic. We want to be seen as a good teammate in the work environment. So we're almost, I don't want to say we're afraid, but we don't want to turn that down because we're worried we won't look like that.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of back to your point of where's the power then? you talked about saying no is like reclaiming our power and kind of like, no, this is where I'm going to be. But so I, and kind of way back to the early beginning about other people's opinions, like when we're so worried about, oh, I need to be look like a good, I need to look like a good employee,
Mhm.
or I need people to think this. Who has our power then?
Right. But like you have to have that power for yourself because you're the only one that can make decisions for yourself. I mean, like I think it's funny that you say that because just this weekend I wasn't feeling too good. I went into work. I think it was like Saturday. I went into work and I got there. He's like, "You sound a little weird. Like you sound a little funky." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll be okay." And just because I wanted to be able to be there for everybody else, the people that were depending on me. And he was telling me over and over again, he's like, "You can go home. Like I have enough help. You can go home if you need." And I made that decision to go home, but I wasn't happy about it. I didn't want him to think that again. I mean, I didn't want him to judge me for going home because I didn't feel good. But it's like I again back to how people judge you and they will blame you and all that kind of stuff. You have to not care. It's like I went home because I wanted to feel better. I needed to get some rest. Um, Rather than stay there and possibly make other people sick, uh, drain myself even more when I should be getting rest.
And then you're probably like me, you probably lay there trying to get better, worrying that you'll never get offered another extra shift.
A little bit, but I mean, I went into work the next day. And they were all like, "Oh, you feeling better?" And so that made me feel better. That made me. But I mean, like I said, it's all about who you surround yourself with, what you're focusing yourself on, and not caring about what other people think about you because the only person you have to worry about is yourself and what journey that you are on.
Love it. Ryan, this has been amazing. I knew I selected an amazing guest and you've lived up to that bill.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to respect your times. If you were to leave, if you were to leave one bit of advice in terms of like being focused on the right thing, not getting distracted to your
Ooh,
younger self.
to
You're
my
transitioning out of middle school as into a freshman in high school. What advice would you give freshman high school Ryan about this?
freshman in high school, Ryan, I would say, and I've said it a million times, but focus your energy where it's needed for you and what path that you belong on, and take opportunities as they come to you. Don't force anything to be anything. Just let it come.
And that, all of us, freshmen or not, is words of wisdom for us. Ryan, I appreciate your time this morning,
Yeah.
this afternoon for you, whatever it may be. And I really look forward to being able to work with you more in the fall.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. I'm very thankful that I had the opportunity to do this. This has been great. Thank you.
Take care.